Welcome into the Division II Baseball Podcast. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Matt Wilson, Commissioner of the Gulf South Conference, one of the great conferences within Division II baseball. So, we're looking forward to this opportunity to talk to Mr. Wilson today all about the conference and the league. And Matt, thanks for taking the time to join us, and welcome to the show. Tell us about how this year has gone from your perspective and shine some light at least on the baseball side of things within the league, because I think that's what our audience is most interested in, although we will dive into all things Gulf South with you today.
That'd be great. Really appreciate you guys having me on today. I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit about it. And we're really proud of our baseball in the Gulf South Conference. We have some natural advantages, obviously being in the Southeast, which is just an absolute hotbed for baseball. And our teams are able to really find players, which creates a deep and competitive league. And sometimes that makes it tougher when we get around to regional selections, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little while. But we're really proud of the baseball we've got. And you look around our league, and it's just amazing what our institutions and teams have done facility-wise. We've got some fantastic facilities. We've got coaches with longevity, coaches with tremendous amount of success, and that's really the backbone of it, right? If you got good coaches, good facilities, you can start attracting good players, and where they say good players make for really good coaches.
And Matt, you were named the Gulf South Commissioner in March 2014 and assumed the duties in May 1. Tell the audience about your kind of experiences so far, as commissioner in the Gulf South Conference. Kind of what exactly does a commissioner of a conference do?
Yeah, no, great question. And that's a moving target all the time. So just depends on what day it is. But in Division II, it's really small shops. We're lucky. We have 5 full-time staff members, counting myself, and that's one of the larger Division II conference staffs in the country. And there's plenty of work to go around. So the commissioner really wears a lot of hats. They're obviously the CEO of the conference, reporting to the presidents and the board of directors. But we also typically serve as the chief financial officer, chief marketing officer, human resources director, and everything in between. So there's a lot going on. People really ask me to drill down on what it's like to be a commissioner. I always say that the biggest thing that we get to do, and one of the most exciting things we get to do, is build consensus to move these groups of institutions forward. And that's really a tricky thing sometimes, but consensus building is probably one of the top skills that a commissioner can have, and you get plenty of chances to work on it.
On that note of just your duties, one of the duties I would think that falls within the conference's office comes down to marketing and branding. And at least from our perspective, we watch a great deal of Division II baseball. And I know with your experience coming into, before you had Gulf South Conference experience, I know you were very dedicated to digital products and to streaming opportunities, where at the Division II level, we see varying levels of quality. However, how is it important to you, or how important is it to you to have a high standard for broadcasting and marketing within the digital products that you consume for people like us that are watching a lot of your games, and the fans, of course, and anyone that wants to tune in?
I think it's really important. That's how folks are consuming things. Prior to becoming Gulf South Commissioner, I was the Chief Operating Officer at the Atlantic Sun Conference, which is a Division I conference, mostly Southeastern based. We were the first mid-major to go all in on the ESPN Plus. So one of my last couple projects was getting Lipscomb University and Kennesaw State University both fully operated on the new ESPN Plus model, which isn't new anymore, but it's, you all know, all student driven. Right? They may hire a producer or a director, but camera operators are students, replay operators, student, audio is students. And that's what we went all in, because we said, look, people are not going to capture our content over linear television. That we may be able to find a little niche and have one game once a week that people get really excited about. But if we can figure out a way that when somebody's sitting up and watching their 65 inch television and watching an SEC basketball game, this is when I was at the A-Sun, and they can also have their tablet or phone next to them to be able to watch our content, second screen type stuff, that's going to be a big win for us. I brought that over here. The Gulf South was the first Division II conference to have a weekly game of the week in football. So we've had a long history of trying to be leaders in that space. When the regional sports network started taking a little bit of a hit as the SEC network and ACC network and all these other affiliate networks came on, that opportunity kind of disappeared, to be frank. Like, there used to be a real flagship in the Southeast called Comcast Sports Southeast. It was a flagship for mid-major college athletics. If you were willing to play at a weird time on a weird day, they'd put you on there for sure. That opportunity left, and so we had to find another path. And we tried ESPN Plus for a little while, and it was a great platform for us. But what we discovered is that we were getting one exposure a week. Well, then Flow Sports, who's been a great partner to Division II and Division III conferences, came to us and said, what if we give you our platform exposure all the way across the board, all sports, all teams? It was really intriguing, and we became the first to go in with them on that, as a full broad package. And this year we introduced baseball for the first time, and softball and soccer, and it's just been a great win for our schools. The media rights revenue is a big enhancement for our schools. Now, clearly, if they're doing it really well, it isn't covering the full freight for the video stream. But if you're not doing video stream anyway, you're already behind the curve. So we're really helping them enhance those video streams. So to that point, we're able to start incrementally increasing our minimum standards. Next year we go to a 2-camera minimum standard, and our hope is it'll be an automated camera behind center field, so you get that view when the pitcher has the ball and releases it, and then you've got a camera that somebody's operating behind home plate. And if that's all you can bring to bear, great. And that'll be a much better production than we were even doing 2 years ago. But I don't know if y'all are tracking on all the advancements in AI camera technology out there, but it is absolutely going through the roof, and it is going to revolutionize how people consume and what our coaches and teams do on the diamond sports in particular with video.
And you mentioned, Flow Sports too. This is the first year, as you mentioned, with baseball going the entire season. Last year was just a conference tournament. What was the decision behind going from just conference tournaments to now a full season with Flow Sports in baseball?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Part of what we found is that Flow Sports found a monetary value in our media rights. And we had not really considered whether those other sports had media right value or not. So one, there was a financial component. The second piece is that we'd had so much success and so much positive feedback from our fan base on the other sports that we said, hey, it can scale and work for every sport. So those two factors helped. And then as our institutions got more comfortable with producing that content and realizing they can do it and they can do it consistently at a high level, I think they felt much more comfortable and easier doing it that way.
With baseball this season, I know you touched on it earlier about regionals and selections. For those that don't know, what is a commissioner's role in the process of having some of their teams represented at the NCAA tournament?
Not as much as people might think. We certainly are advocates for our folks. We want to wave the flag. We want our communication staff to really promote the heck out of our teams so that people are familiar with them. But a lot of Division II comes down to metrics. And we've got what they call regional advisory committees, which are made up of 2 representatives from each of the 3 conferences in your region. So a 6-person committee, and they drill into some data and numbers that are provided by the NCAA championship staff. And it's really hard for them to justify selections that the data can't back up. So they may be able to do it in their regional group, but the regional group's recommendations on rankings go to the national group, and then they start vetting it as well. So it's really difficult. So what we have to do as commissioner, though, what can we do to help? We've got to create scheduling opportunities and margins in the way we schedule or the way we format our tournament that provide us an opportunity to gain advantages in those metrics. And that could look different by sport. And it's really hard to figure it out. The one thing I always tell our coaches, schedule the absolute best in-region team that you can beat, and you beat them, and that's the best you're going to be able to do. So for some teams, that may mean they've got to look at a different quality of opponent, while other teams say, hey, we have to play the very best of the best to get where we're going. But at the end of the day, all we can do is try to create opportunities for our teams to succeed, and then they've got to find ways to schedule that's within both their budget and their competition aspirations, and then they've got to have success.
And you mentioned a little bit about, formatting, especially, kind of this will be a bit of like a two-pronged question, but, in Division II baseball, there's different conferences that maybe have 4 games in a weekend, 3 games in a weekend with, conference midweeks. So the first question is like, what had you decide on 3-game weekends, typically with, 1 game on Friday, 2 games Saturday? And what had you decide not just for the format of the tournament, 18 double elimination, but the dates of the tournament as well?
2 good questions. Let's tackle the tournament one first. That one's a little bit easier. So the tournament dates, our coaches love a margin between the end of their tournament and the start of regionals to rest and recover and make sure their pitching is on rotation heading into those first round of regionals. That is critically important. So having that extra set of margin allows them to create that space. And that's really the dates. That's what drives the dates. The format continues to be a conversation among our coaches on what the right format is. You see it around the country, right? We're one of the few that still do a traditional 18 tournament, and it is a grind. You get in that loser's bracket early, either day 1 or day 2, and have to try to fight out of it. That's a lot of pitches. That's a lot of at bats. That's a lot of work to get out of that and get back to the championship game. So our coaches have looked at some things. They just feel like this is the most appropriate way in a league are competitive to determine who our AQ representative is. On the regular season, our coaches, like many around Division II, if resources were of no consequence, we'd be playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 9-inning games. I don't think that there's a coach in our league that wouldn't say they'd want to do that if resources were of no consequence. Resources are of immense consequence for institutions right now. And if they tell you it's not, I think they're making it up. So got to be real fiscally responsible and good stewards of resources. That's why we have stuck with a single 9-inning and then a 9 and a 7. And then we have an option to extend it to 3 days if weather creates havoc for us, which is a pretty consistent occurrence down here in the Southeast for sure. So I think that's really where we're at on regular season scheduling. Now that we're at 12 teams, we've been able to go to 33 conference games. So everybody's playing everybody 1 3-game series, which is really good for determining our seedings and our championships and all of that sort of stuff, and provides a great experience for our student athletes.
And within just the Gulf South, in the South, it's so tough because you have the Sunshine State Conference as well when we look at a regional for baseball. And it was interesting because last year you get 4 teams, half the field represented within, and it seems like you're going to have some good opportunities again this year to get some more teams in. Robert and I just had West Florida enter our national conversation with the way they've been playing, and then Delta State's been there all season long. You mentioned head coaches, and I just kind of wanted to touch on those guys because those are some of the most respected guys in the country in Division II baseball. When you talk about Rodney Batts and you talk about Mike Jeffco, what does it mean as a commissioner just to have some guys that, yes, they're known commodities within the league, but across the country that can be an ambassador for this conference when you go play non-conference competition early on in the season?
It's great for us. I mean, you have guys like Rodney and Mike that'll take care of making sure the conference is on the right track. They're both reasonable guys who have great experience, and they're terrific communicators. They can make sure that we're talking about the important issues. We're not getting bogged down in anything that's not important. And they can have a pulse on what's going on nationally. And that's a difficult thing to do because what's happening in the Atlantic or East region sometimes doesn't even look anywhere near like what we're dealing with in the South or the Southeast or the South Central region. So trying to manage that is a really difficult thing, but having those guys with their experience, their temperament, their professionalism makes a huge difference for us, and it really impacts our other coaches and has been good as our younger coaches have gone in. And also, you all know the value of institutional history. Those guys have seen a lot about what the Gulf South has been about for the last 2 decades, in one way or another. And that helps a ton too. It certainly helps me.
And Matt, I wanted to ask about the, newest edition in the Gulf South and Trevecca Nazarene, their impact entering the conference, and then, just one is just, how does those conversations go if you're thinking about adding a new team into the Gulf South Conference?
Yeah, those are always tricky conversations because we're not just one sport, right? If you were single sport, some of those conversations would be really easy sometimes because you look and say, wow, Trevecca, they're, a little over an hour from Union, couple hours from Lee, hour and a half from UAH. They're right in our footprint. They were in the World Series a few years ago. They're in Nashville. Their facility's good. Natural. Let's go. But we're a league of 19 sports. So we have to look and go, all right, well, we've got football sponsorship issues. We need to address those. We can't fill all our slots of membership until we address those. Oh, can they bring track and field because we're one short on track and field and we need to be able to do that. So those conversations are tough. What I think we really look at in the Gulf South is, will they fit geographically? And we can expand our footprint a little bit, right? Trevecca did expand our footprint a little bit, not much, but a little. Will they be able to compete for regional and national titles in some sports? That's just part of our identity. The GSC, every school in the conference expects one of their teams to make a run in regionals. I can guarantee you. It may only be one team at a few schools, but it may be all 19 at another school. They're expecting to win regional, have a chance to win a regional title. Not every conference can say that, no matter what their commissioner tells you. And then third, unfortunately, we're in a day and age where we've got to make sure an institution is fiscally committed to athletics, but also fiscally sound as an institution. We're going to see more institutions close over the next 5 or 6 years. So you have to go in eyes wide open. Trevecca checked every single box for us and made it a really no-brainer for us. And they have been a great addition so far.
And is that something with expansion that you continue to look at that criteria to perhaps see if other schools in the future could come along and join the conference? Because I know mainstream wise, if people just talk about college athletics at the Division I level with all the changes, do you think that's going to be as prevalent at the Division II level? And is it something, at least at your office, that you're going to be looking at as well moving forward now?
For sure. So great question. I think it comes in a couple of different forms. The answer does. One, there are going to be changes. The Gulf South Conference has been around since very early 1970, 71, 72, something like that. There's a 1 5-year period in the history of the conference. Okay. So that's 50 years, 1 5-year period where we've had the same membership, where there wasn't a single change. Okay. So in 50 years, no matter how you divide up 5-year segments, there's one of them where we had the same membership from the start of that 5-year period to the end. We are going to have more changes. So we have to decide whether we want to go ahead and aggressively pursue additional members and try to grow to 14, 16, 18, or do we want to say 12 is a fantastic number because we can play 33 baseball games, 22 basketball, it fits in our schedule great, we got natural travel partners, all the things, and then be reactive when somebody makes a decision to do something else. And they will. I mean, again, it's disingenuous to pretend that these 12 would stay together forever. There's only one league in all of the world that has done that, and that's the Ivy League. They don't have to worry about whether they're going to expand or not or lose anybody. All the rest of us have to keep it on track. So, yeah, we've got to consider those things, but we also have to be really cognizant of those 3 buckets to make sure that we're meeting a future member meets those things, because otherwise you create dissatisfaction among the membership. If your geography gets too big, somebody says, well, that doesn't make any sense for me anymore. I've got to look for something else. If you find a team that's just going to finish dead last in every single sport across the board, and your kids are going to have a terrible game day experience at their place because the facilities are not good and they don't have any resources to put to it, people are going to say, why am I playing these people when I can be playing other people? We've got to be really intentional about it. But it's a tightrope to walk to decide whether you say 12 is great, because our 12 are really, really good right now. It's a really good combination of 12. And do we go ahead and step out and say, okay, we're going to mess with our schedules and grow a little bit to get bigger, to make sure that we're ready for whatever Gulf South version, whatever version we're coming up on looks like in 4 or 5 years.
And you mentioned it earlier too about being, the limited resources plus being, fiscally responsible. What are some challenges you face slash how do you handle, the, I guess, plethora of distances in the Gulf South Conference, ranging from, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, you name it, with all those different geographical locations. What are some challenges that you have to face in terms of being, fiscally responsible and with the resources that you do have?
Yeah, our schools do a really good job of managing. So we try to schedule what they call travel partners in as many sports as we can. So an example of that would be in volleyball. If you go to West Tennessee, you'll play Union on Friday night, Christian Brothers on Saturday night, and then go home. That way you're making the most of a road trip and in your time in the bus. Using the 3-game series in baseball and softball so that you can go park the bus one place and not change hotels makes a big difference. So that's where we have to be cognizant of it, is how we schedule. And a lot of that'll be travel partners and multiple games on one swing. And then that lets our teams really focus, if they need to, hyper local on non-conference games, so that West Florida and Spring Hill can play midweeks when it's only 45 minutes away. Or Montevallo and Miles can when they're 30 or 40 minutes away. So they can really focus on those things where they can save money on non-conference. That way they can make those trips in conference. Our geography looks stretched out compared to the Sunshine State or maybe the PSAC or Conference Carolinas or the SAC, but it looks really good compared to the RMAC or the Pac West or somebody. So I guess it's all perspective sometimes.
That is true. And speaking of geography, at least for you, I know that you started your career at Belmont, right, in Tennessee?
That's right.
And one thing that I found interesting is you were started in the sports information world, and then moved to assistant athletic director, and that now move on. You described your role previously with the ASUN and now here. So is like when you're as an assistant SID, is being a commissioner of a conference, is that like the path you thought, or how does that work out for you? In fact, we could just learn a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, no, well, no, I didn't really think I was going to be a commissioner when I was a 22-year-old assistant SID, but it's worked out okay. So I was at Belmont when they made the move from NAIA to Division One, and they don't even allow you to do that anymore. But I'm taking a night marketing class, and their assistant AD for marketing, who was probably also their ticket manager and 7 other roles at the time, came and looked for student workers, right? Like you do in college. So they had some federal work study money, and I was able to qualify for that. So I just jumped in and helped them with marketing my senior year. Well, about halfway through that year, their SID quit, and I'd worked at student newspaper and that sort of stuff. And I said, I can write. And writing was a really big deal for the SID world back then, more so than it is now. It was really the primary focus. If you could write and keep some stats, you'd be a really, really good SID at the time. So I jumped in, did a good enough job. The AD asked me if I'd come back and work for $1,200 a month. Said he can't give me any insurance, couldn't give me any retirement, but he'd let me eat pregame meals with the teams and give me a couple polos. And I said, man, that's a good life for a 22-year-old in downtown Nashville. So we'll do that. And we had a great time. And, just the next year, same situation. They didn't find an SID that worked. He resigned, and they just popped me into it. And like I tell people when they ask me about it, I looked for ways that I could fill a void, and I popped in there and tried to work as hard as I could and hope that somebody recognized. And that's what happened, and just kept growing into the role there. And eventually had a chance to go to conference work because I found out I was pretty good at running events. That was really what I enjoyed. And they hired me as a championships and media guy over there. And again, looked where I could help and kept growing into the role. So all of a sudden I said, working as a commissioner is not a bad gig. It's hard to even imagine going back to campus. The work that those folks do on campus is is unbelievable. The hours and the energy they have to put in to make sure those games happen and provide the experience that our student athletes and their families hope for. It would be a really big change for me at my stage in life right now to shift to that. You know, commissioners are much more small business owners than they are athletic directors, and it would be a big change. So I'm really happy with where we got, but that's the short version of a long story.
Hey, that's a great story still, nonetheless, Matt, especially just learning about the journey of going from, assistant SID all the way up to commissioner. And so the final question I want to ask you regarding baseball, as someone who's had experience, working in an 18 double elimination tournament, from the conference's perspective with the staff, what are those days like, playing that first game as early as, 9 in the morning, and then the final game could be done as late as 1 in the morning.
When you go to a 18 double elimination baseball tournament, you're just buckling up for 5 or 6 really long days. So I'm lucky. I've got a really good staff, and Mike Anderson, Jason Oliveira handle our baseball championship for the most part. That weekend we have our track and field championship, our softball championship, and our baseball championship. So we divide and conquer that weekend, and they handle it. I tell you what it is, though. There was one time that I was working that at Stetson when I was at the A-Sun, and some of the guys that I worked with still give me a hard time because we were on about day 5 and it had rained every single day, and we're at the ballpark till God knows when. And there was a day where I fell asleep leaning up against the wall, where I just dropped my water bottle and it spilled water everywhere else, and I was just completely dead asleep. And that's what I think working a 5-day double elimination baseball tournament feels like by the time you get to the end, is that you could fall asleep standing up if you needed to. But man, when you're there and watching it, it's usually pretty good baseball. If you can get around the 10 a.m. start or around the midnight finish, everything in between is pretty good.
Hey, that is awesome stuff. And I know that that's going to be a very fun tournament to follow, at least on our side. And kind of like we touched on earlier, you have a couple teams that could try to make a run at it this year. The South region always is a region that performs well at Cary. Historically, over the last decade, they've had the highest winning percentage at Cary. So that'll be fun to see. And we just really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. We're super grateful for that. And so I just wanted to leave you with that and tell you thanks for taking the time to join us. And we're excited to continue to follow what you do at the Gulf South.
Well, we appreciate you guys' passion for D2 baseball and helping platform us in a way that we can't do sometimes. And we wish you all the luck, anything we can do to support. And we hope people will come to Oxford, Alabama and watch that baseball tournament or a part of it. If not, they can catch it on Flow Sports. It's the premier amateur facility in the Southeast, 2,500 seats, covered roof, clubhouses for both teams, practice and warm-up fields, video board. We are so lucky to be there. And the facility matches the quality of the baseball that'll be on the field.
And that is Matt Wilson, Commissioner of the Gulf South Conference.